Hello, hello, and welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. This Mind, Body, Soul Mastery podcast is a place where we explore what it really means to live with intention, to lead from the heart, and to walk through life with a deeper connection to mind, body, and soul. And whether I'm sitting down with a guest or just sharing what I'm learning in real time, my hope is that you'll hear something that invites you back to yourself. So take a deep breath and let's drop into today's conversation. Today, I'm with Bunny, and Bunny joins me to, I don't know what we're going to talk about, and that's kind of exciting for me. She's devoted her life to helping people transform their relationship with themselves. She's a teacher, a writer, a podcast host, a somatic astrologer, which that is interesting to me, and a
Mhm.
coach. So, Bunny, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a joy to be here, and I am so looking forward to what unfolds in our conversation as well.
Me too. I think that's my favorite part about hosting this podcast is what unfolds and the epiphanies and the awareness and the ahas that come in every conversation. It really truly is my favorite thing.
Mm.
So, can you you're human living this life and there's lots of pivotal moments, but think what comes to mind if you think about the pivotal moment that really shifted something so deeply within you that it changed the trajectory?
It's such a rich question, and when I was preparing and feeling into, of all the pivots, the one that really stood out to me was actually my husband and I. We've been together for about 16 years. We've been married for
Hmm.
most of
Hmm.
that time. We had been together for around about 7, maybe 8 years when I had this real feeling in my body of actually finally being able to receive the love that he was giving
Mm.
me. And I remember having a conversation with him, and I went up to him and I said, I think I'm ready to let you love me now. And he said, baby, what do you think I've been doing all these years?
Mm.
And that is, to me, that was such a pivotal moment in recognizing how much we keep at arm's length, how much is outside of us that could be inside of us that hasn't quite married up yet,
Yeah.
spiritually, physically, mentally. And I think more people could probably connect with that experience than they might feel that they have space to share. And so what I'm hoping is that in your listeners hearing this, that something will tingle, something will land, something will arrive.
Yeah. Well, hello, raise my hand because yeah, it's resonating for me. So I'm curious, what when he said that to you, babe, what do you think what I've been doing for the last? What was your emotional reaction in that moment?
From a somatic perspective, it felt like a cool wind sort of blowing through my
Mm.
body, or a breeze. We might think of it as chills, maybe even pins and needles, or tingles. And at the same time, it was also like, I don't know if you guys have this in the US, but when I grew up, we had a game called Kerplunk. And so it was kind of
Okay.
two spheres that was sat on top of each other, and it had a load of like skewers that go in the middle, and then you put marbles on the top. And then the game is you pull the skewers out, and then the marbles kind of go kerplunk. That's the whole game is,
Okay.
is that essentially. So there was this very visceral sensation of that game, of these sort of these skewers, or these messages, or these swords, or these arrows that had perhaps been in my body via other experiences that maybe weren't so
Mm.
loving or so
Hmm.
caring. And then that real sense of it just dropping in, from heaven to earth, it just coming straight through the body, straight through. It wasn't a thought, it was a felt sense experience. And it was also very quiet. I really remember
Mm,
there wasn't, even my, it's like even my ego or any of the parts of me were just silenced for a little bit whilst we all took on board.
almost
Y-
like absorbing.
Yes, yeah, almost like absorbing. I love that.
Mm.
Yeah.
What was your mind body connection in those 16 years of marriage?
Hmm. I would have, I trained as a dancer and an actor back in my original sort of form as I think of it. So I would have always said to you that I thought I was somebody that was somatically aware and having an
Hmm.
understanding of what the body
Hmm.
is and the body mind as we call it in
Yeah,
somatic
yeah.
science. So for me, I know that my mind is a part, but it's not the only part, and she has a seat at the table. And I think over the years, I've just tuned in more and more and more to the body mind and in relationship with myself and in relationship with my husband, but equally in relationship with everything that's around
Hmm.
me. And why is that important? Well, maybe 10, 16 years ago, I might have spoken from more of an emotional context or place. For example, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry. Through parts work, I now understand something in me is feeling sad. Some
Hmm.
part of me
Hmm.
is experiencing something. And now, as a trauma informed, somatic coach, I understand that sensations are also another language that we get to speak. And that helps us with the body, mind, spirit connection. So
Hmm.
if I'm feeling fizzy or jaggy or like I have a rock in my tummy or if I'm feeling like, oh, my left earlobe is a little bit itchy, those are all sensations and they all really matter. So through the relationship and through those years, I think my connection with mind, body, spirit, body, mind has deepened and got richer. And at midlife, late 40s, I still just feel like it's like not even scratching the surface, it's the surface above the surface,
Yeah,
it's still
yeah.
up here to come into this felt sense that we're allowed to have, but we're not trained in the language and we're not
Mm,
really modeled for us. So it can be difficult we jump to emotion, which is important. It's really important to name that and express it. But actually to be able to just come in and find the sensations in your body, name them, meet them, hang out with them. And then as a result of that, you feel more grounded, more centered, more
yeah,
attuned, more trusting, more aware. You may even feel, for example, yeah, more psychic, more connected, more gifted. It's just there's so much that's possible through the portal of the body.
yeah. So how I just heard you explain that as being able to name the emotions, like that's great, but it's then that next deeper layer of
Yeah.
noticing where is it in my body and what does that feel like,
Yes. Yes.
right? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the what is it? Oh, sorry, no, go on. Yeah.
No, you go. You
I
had the
was just
thought, go.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and the what does it feel like if we can stay out of story for a wee bit, if we can stay out of story and again bring it back to, yeah, fizzy, buzzy, tickly, butterfly, sensation language,
Yeah,
and
simply accepting it is what it is.
yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, like
Yeah.
grumbly tummies are understood via hunger or thirst. Is it if we've had an accident and you go to the doctor or the hospital, they might say, is it a sharp pain or is it
Yeah.
is it what it so we have some language, kind of around it, but there's a whole sort of lexicon of expression that's available to us that again allows us to have a relationship with our own bodies, which can sometimes be incredibly frightening to live in your own body and to have a relationship with that. But it also helps us, it helps us give our kids language as well for
Mm,
conversations so that it's not a temper tantrum. It's something's happening with overwhelm in the
yeah.
system. And where is the little one feeling that? And for example, like the back of their left knee just feels weird. okay, well, let's go and say hello to that weird, and then let's see what happens from there. So that it's gentler, it's more tender, but it's also quicker in terms of supporting us to, yeah, be aware of where we are, what we're experiencing, how to have a relationship with it.
Hmm.
That might result with in the outer world as well.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to just the statement, like, I'm ready to receive your love.
Mhm.
I have kind of a two-part question. So, what like patterns, thoughts, stories did you have up until that point? And then once that was said to your husband, like what began to unravel and unfold?
Mm. Mm. It's almost easier, I think, to maybe talk about the unraveling first in that
Okay.
instance, because unraveling is such a great word. I wouldn't it and at the same time the before part is also there. So I wouldn't have typically identified that how I was behaving, say, in my marriage or in other relationships, friendships, kinships, was say performative. But I began to recognize that there was definitely some, people pleasing that was present. There was
Mm, mm,
definitely performativity. And by that I mean things like sort of being addicted to being the concept of the good wife, being,
mm,
playing into very, cisgender, heteronormative, traditional marriage roles. And in a way, I also feel now being able to reflect on it. On the one hand, what I was saying, was I think I'm ready to let you love me now. But I think what another part of me was saying was I think I'm really ready to let more of me come online. I think
mm.
there's actually more of me now that we're through this, what we might think of as that first cycle, that actually is it too also wants to be loved. So
Yeah,
these parts that I might have exiled, these parts that I might have sent away, these parts that maybe didn't feel lovable, I came from a very mixed experience, a colorful background, and also I came through a very violent relationship that left a lot of physical and mental
hmm,
scarring.
hmm,
So there was related to that a sensation of shame and of
mm.
self-judgment, and also at the same time, perhaps of feeling unworthy. But that's the thing about love. Love shows up consistently for
Yeah,
us all the time. She doesn't take a day off. Love is like, why would I ever take a day off from loving you? What are you talking about?
right,
Like
right.
I'm right here. It's right here. I'm right here with you. So there were, I think, protective behaviors that were going on because of previous things. I think also when you're recovering from partner violence and those types of experiences, trust does take time. And you can
Yeah.
be in a really healthy relationship and a very healthy marriage and have lots of things in place. But again, somatically, via all of the systems in the body and via the parts, they need to be allowed to have as much time. And
Mm.
there's no number on that at all, as to, when something just might feel safe. And then being able, excuse me, to be the person, that can say to their beloved, hey, I think I'm ready to let you love me now. And for that other person to be like, "Hmm, well, what have I been doing? Like it
I
didn't
think
become
that's so beautiful.
yeah, it's so it just is it's so human. It's what's possible for us when we're just in that place of openness, non-judgment, everything is accepted here.
So your a lot of your adult life has been this somatic, this body work, this connection, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Um, how has that gotten deeper since that?
Mm. The deepening of the somatic work and the body work for me has become a very rich softening. It's sort of like leaving butter out in the sun.
Mm, that's
It's
such a great visual. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, you know, like the butter cannot help but melt. Like even if it didn't want to, but what's happened is that the butter, like the body, when it's put in an environment that allows it to melt or to thaw, because that's what we're talking about. If we're talking about
yeah,
coming out of freeze, we're talking about thawing. You don't want to defrost instantly because that's also too much for the system. Or
right.
or even again, if you cook something from frozen that you're not supposed to, you're playing with fire there, like it's just we all know that. And
The bets
actually
are off that it's going to be good.
yeah, yeah, so there is this melting, this thawing, yeah, this sort of butter in the sunshine. And then it's interesting because you just discover, coming back to the language of sensations, you might simply start noticing, I keep clenching this left shoulder blade, or I've noticed
Mm,
really tight in my tongue is really tight again, or oh, I'm not breathing, or when was the last time I took an inhale or an exhale, or okay, hang on a minute, or I'm clenching my tummy. So there has been for me through the science and through all that there is, and we're barely scraping the surface again with what we know about the body and all its processes and systems. But there are really just there's so much more space for tenderness, and there's
yeah,
so much more space for softness, and there's in all of that, there's also recovery from hypervigilance. There's also recovery from overproductivity. There's also recovering from addiction to our worthiness, being married to our
hmm
productivity.
hmm
And for me, it's become this archetype of, well, what is it like to be a really rested, relaxed, rich woman that gets to create a life, a love affair with life, and then in turn also help other women, other people do that as well,
yeah,
so that we slow down, so that we sip on life, and so that we savor all those flavors that we're all working so, so hard to create. And yet, for example, with flavor, the first 7 years, kind of my relationship with my husband, I don't think I was really tasting any of those things. Subsequently, now it's a finessing of that, and a paying attention, which means, interestingly enough, that really natural, wonderful byproducts come into play, like great boundaries, because you're listening to your body. You might have said
hmm
yes to something yesterday, and today you have to tend to it, but maybe you've only got 45 minutes in the tank and not 2 hours at the after school club, or
yeah.
maybe you need to negotiate around a decision that's been made. And there's no aggression or unkindness in any of that. It's simply noticing what you're noticing, paying attention to the sensations that are in the body, taking some time, having some space, and then practicing, because it does feel really weird at first to have a language. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to give me an example of practicing because what I'm hearing is, um, I love everything I'm hearing, just so you know. Um, it's also this slowing down, this intentional, but you're taking it almost this deeper layer and then going into the body and what are you noticing? And you might have given us example, but I'm just not connecting dots. So what would that look like?
I love that so much. So, a really simple one is, if you have a glass of water or a drink, a cup of tea, are you actually in a relationship with it? Have you tasted it? Did you take a minute? What mug or vessel is it in? Is it so many women that I know, they make a cup of coffee and then they do this crazy thing where they just drink, glug, 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 and it's gone, it moves me so much. It makes me want to cry because there's in such a rush. Their body is rushing, they're
Mm-hmm.
rushing.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it sounds really tiny, it's like making a ritual out of the very mundane experiences that we have in our life. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, hand on the heart, hand on the tummy, fuller inhale, fuller exhale. I'm in a body today. How rad. Okay, great. Interesting. Before anything else comes in, which is like, the creaky knee or the lower back or why haven't
Yeah.
I got this new mattress yet? It could even be a place of thank you. It could even be a place of, Spirit, I'm handing my whole day over to you right now. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with me all throughout the day. It's sitting up in bed and then it's feeling your feet on the carpet, the rug, the wood. It's scrunching your toes. It's really connecting and feeling them in there. As you go about your morning, it's paying attention as you wash your hands maybe for the first time and you feel the water on your hands, like water coming out the tap, just there, available.
It's like fully present in every motion, every movement, and all senses
Completely,
at the
completely.
same all right. Because when just some of the things you're describing, I always do sip and savor my cup of coffee because that is like just luxury to me. But washing my hands, that's rote. That's just rote. We got to do it, right? 20 seconds, whatever. My mind is elsewhere. And so what I hear you really talking about is truly being present and intentional in all of the micro moments, micro movements.
Yeah, yeah. All of the micro moments, all of the micro movements, totally. Now, look, if you've got
Mm,
between 1 and 5 kids to get out the door or something like that, for everybody listening, or there's 8 dogs at the bottom of the bed, or, it's like it's find a second or two,
yeah.
within that where maybe you just look at your hands, you look at the palms of your hands, you turn them over, you look at the backs of your hands. No judgment here, no stories, just a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny second of connection. For me, sometimes it's even, when I'm locking or unlocking the house doors or windows. I'm just so appreciative to the doors and to the windows and to the house and to all that there is. And for me, because I live in a way that is a life of ritual and a life of ceremony, it really helps me be present. And
Mm,
it's not necessarily about, the sort of fashion of slow living per se, but to your point, it is intentional and it is about living on purpose. Because what I've certainly noticed, and from that pivot moment, that we opened our conversation with, is that the more attention I pay, the more I notice what doesn't feel like a love affair with life, the more I know
mm,
this lingerie that I'm wearing is digging in and it doesn't fit. So I have to change that. The more I notice, actually, I had a pair of trousers that I'd stapled the hem at the bottom, because the thing had come loose and I had to just stitch that, but it's like we start to live with all these little uncomfortable things and they're really
yeah.
itchy and they're problematic and they create irritation in the body, and irritation often then starts to show up as other things that creates frustration, that can often create disconnection, that can often create other interruptions to our peace. And so, if it is something as simple as, as you're listening to this episode, somebody thinks, oh my goodness, I really don't like that weird thing I've got on the bookcase, or, I've started this book, but it's terrible. I'm never going to finish it. Give them away, donate them to
And
charity.
yes.
Just
And give yourself the freedom. It's okay to not finish it. I don't have to finish everything I start. It's okay. Like this
100%.
permission, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
permission. Yeah. It's with the time that we have, it's important to reclaim that and spend that time. in a way that really lifts your heart and connects you to your spirit and to your soul, that helps the day feel like it at least has a little bit of divinity in it, and that you too
Yeah.
might be connected to that divinity, and that you might be the paintbrush. Some days I like to think that I'm God's paintbrush and God is painting with me, or sometimes I'm also an absolute chaotic mess that forgets everything that we're talking about in this
Yeah.
really beautiful environment that we're in right now. And that's allowed also. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. And we can also thread and weave these conscious connections throughout the day for ourselves and for other people that they can change your life. They can change your life when you start paying attention, because then
Yeah.
you also start paying attention to yourself. You start paying attention to the people around you. And then also you notice where people are probably paying more attention to you than you
Right.
might have noticed before. So then again, more love gets in.
Right. So talk to me about your inner knowing and your soul's guidance.
Mm.
I'm just going to leave that broad open.
So I was born as just with an inner knowing and an inner guidance, that as we have this saying in Scotland about the veils are very thin, or that
Mm,
there are thin places that you go to where you might feel that spirit or beauty or love or God or whatever your language is might be a wee bit closer than it is somewhere else. But for me, I am a thin place. I am a thin veil. And it's just always, always been like that. So I've always had a conversation with spirit that to me lives in my heart. And
hmm.
that's where I go. And I really talk about that in my own teachings as there being these chambers of the heart in which there's different things that live in there, both anatomically and metaphysically. And so I'm always paying attention to what my heart is suggesting. And it can be a gesture, a movement, a color, a poem, a line. And for me, my question with that, with sorry, the answers I always get to my questions from my inner knowing is they're really straightforward, and it's always typically a yes or a no. From as long as I've been a kid, there's always been this voice that's like, kid, you know that this is the next step. You got to go in this direction. Or, kid, why are we having this conversation? So I don't do things like I never ask for a second sign. The first one is
Mm,
right. I'm never negotiating with surrender, because surrender is just a really natural part of our experience. And if we're negotiating, it means we want to be in control of, the
yeah. Yeah.
outcome, and I'm always available, yeah, for the inner knowing, and that being in relationship to nature too. Also, as a Celtic woman, as a Scottish woman, it's our paths are steeped in mysticism and relationships with things such as the fae and magic and the trees and
Mm,
land and the archetypes and the old stories. And to have the relationship with your own heart is to have the relationship with your own body, which has infinite intelligence that we barely
yes.
scratch the surface of.
Yes. Yes. And we really need to get out of the ego and get out of the mind. And what you described, just that the tuning in and noticing the things, right? As the simple little things, those micro movements, those micro moments to really get back into the body is how you're going to develop that relationship. That's how you're going to develop that. And I just want to say, like, intuition is a muscle that we have to. I just kind of say is a muscle that we have to kind of condition. We have to learn to use it, trust it, right? And so everything that you've described is all part of that developing, that practicing, that allowing.
Mm.
And
And
that surrender into.
and that surrender into, yeah, totally. And for me, certainly I've noticed, but this is changing now, but certainly the last 20, 25 years are connection to all the different tools that are available, whether it's nature, crystals, journaling, tarot, oracle, astrology,
Yeah.
cartography, human design. All of these things are incredibly important, but they're no more important than you and your body and your soul. They're no more important than that. And spiritual addiction is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. This sense of constantly having to go outside yourself to ask a question, pulling another card, going on
Yeah.
another, looking for a signy or sign. Once I've had 17 owls, then I'll
But
do the, yeah, go
yeah.
on. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think that I'm going to be bold and say that's partly what the lie that we believe, that it's outside of us, that someone's going to give me that reading or someone's going to give me that. Because there are moments when I feel that way. God, I would just love someone to that. Right. There's moments that I feel that way. Yet I think that the biggest truth and the biggest way to know your truth is to go within, is to what is your what is your body telling you? What is your soul telling you? Because the mind is going to lie until you've worked through that, right?
Yeah. And remembering that the mind is also part of us too, but it's not all of it. It's our brain is the most sort of heavy worked organ. We have multiple organs and they all have wisdom. They all have
Yes.
intelligence. They all have wonder. There's something absolutely miraculous about
Yes.
each and every single part of us. Our skin cells are, if you want to know how the waters of you are, tune into your kidneys. If you want to know how you're digesting life, have a conversation with your liver. If you want to know whether you are actually as stressed as you feel, literally tap into your adrenals that sit on top of the kidneys because they will be
Mm,
like little tap dancers on there. And when you're quiet enough, you can feel it. You can feel
mm.
it. We're very thin. There's not, our skin is next to nothing. There's really not a barrier to entry at all. It's a willingness to practice and to study and to be with and to play and enjoy. And to your point about the ego as well, it's like we can get to a point of mastery where the ego is settled and it has a purpose and it has a job and it is employed by us. Therefore, it is an abundant resource. It's
Yes.
not
Yes.
something that's trying to take us out. But
I
again,
love that. Employed by us.
employed by us. Yes, may
Yes.
it be so. May it be so. And so it's like the ego gets a really bad rap, but it's unless we help it to grow up and mature, it will stay a toddler our
Yeah.
entire lives. And so we'll be trying to move through the seasons of life, our spring, summer, autumn, winter, or maiden, mother, magi, crone. We'll be trying to move through all these things with a kind of it's like with the but we'll still be trying to do it on dial up as opposed to fiber optics.
Mm, hmm
So it's
hmm
like we've got to, the invitation is to bring everything with us and let the duality of it all be present. It's not necessarily always comfortable, but when you can get
Yeah.
into a groove of understanding, that's also okay because discomfort is a sensation. And where is that sensation in your body? What does it have to tell you? You start to come into this place of self-mastery. So then you start to come into radical self-awareness and then radical
Yeah.
self-love. And then when your ego is employed by you, we ought to at that point also mature through self-individuation and be able to come back into supporting the collective and one another. It's really important for us to have our teenage years in our individuation, but if we're doing that in our late 20s and beyond, we've got to mature through it so that we can really start to get into our superpowers, so we can really
Yeah.
start to get into our magic and our knowing and our presencing, and so that we can all start to turn up really again as a presence of love and even equally just being present to one another because we
Present
feel
period.
present full,
Yes.
yes, yes, are you with me? Are you in
Yeah.
the room
Yeah.
with me? Like, I know you're
Yeah.
sitting here on the sofa, but are you actually here? Because
Right.
it doesn't feel like I feel really lonely.
Right. Right.
So there's so much, there's so much in all of this.
Yeah. So I want to move, I want to go back to that 16 years ago and that I'm ready to receive your love. And just talk to me about like from that moment, the integration piece, and how did you move forward with that? And how did you change
Mm, mm,
because of that?
thank you. So how did I integrate that? For me, I'm a great journaler and a great letter writer. So, if memory serves, there was a lot of writing and journaling that was going on. And I was writing to love from a really
Mm,
practical perspective. But the thing that I was also doing was I was having love write back to me. So, I would
mm.
write, love, I've just had this experience. Who knew? And love was like, well, I knew. And I was like, well, that's great for you.
I love that.
And then, and I would say this feels different. This feels like maybe I was saying this feels different. This feels like a shift. This feels like a growing up, and it also feels like a growing in. What, and
Mm,
I would ask, which has really been my daily prayer, what else do I need to know about this?
mm,
What
mm.
else do we need to know about this? Or what am I not seeing here? That's really in the room with me. And that, I
Yeah.
would, oh, thank you so much, love Bunny. And then I would have love right back, dear Bunny, thanks so much for your question. Yeah, you're right. It is in the room with you. You're right. You do have a blind spot here. Like, I'm going to tell you what
Mm,
that is today, and just sit
mm.
with it today, or take this idea for a walk, which, excuse
Yeah.
me, say really do go on a walk with the idea. So journaling, but journaling to journaling and being responded to, really important. I also, there would have been, as there always is, a lot of salt baths and a lot of it. I'm a Cancer rising. Okay. So
Mm,
I'm always
mm.
in the water. So, so a lot of salt baths, and that's important for space for me personally, but also from a magnesium intake and a supporting the body intake as well. And a lot of allowing myself to also express a greater love that was also emerging through me for my husband and for our life, and therefore the designing into of what that might be and what that might become, and then allowing also all of it to be there and not feeling that there was anything to be done either.
Mm, mm.
We can be so quick to jump into process, and we can be, because we've been trained again, I'll just process this and I'll integrate it and I'll move through it. Whereas I
Yeah.
don't know what that timeline is. And to some extent, I do feel that part of me is still integrating that whole experience. And why not? Why
Yeah.
not? It's okay. It's totally okay.
Yeah. It's hard though, this this integration and this waiting, this unknown timeline.
Yeah. We don't do well with that as humans.
No.
No, it can be
No.
helpful. For me, as a place of gentleness, would recommend to give peace or to bring some peace to that. Choose a cycle that's right for you. So it could be
Mm,
30 days, it could be moon to moon, as you might be like, okay, this is, we're this moon here, and I'm gonna, for until this moon cycle comes again, I'm gonna do this for
yeah.
28 days. It could be a season of 3 months. It could be for the rest of the year. You can choose.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can choose. And then within that, and this is what I do when I'm working with people as well, we'll have space for reflection. Okay, so this was the original inquiry, or okay, this was the most recent pivot moment. Let me just check in with that here. 3 weeks later, 3 months later, 3 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
How I'm feeling with that? What's my relationship to it? Has anything changed? And if it has, what's changed? Did I notice anything? Did I not notice anything? And of course, a really big one as well is allowing more time for celebration. You know,
Mm,
pivot moments are very often moments where really we ought to celebrate. But again, we're not very good at that in our culture.
no, we're
You know,
not.
just taking a pause, it can be a moment. And also we often think of celebration as capitalism in a way that we something has to be purchased, and that might be
Yep.
so. That's great. That's also totally allowed. But it could be creating more space for yourself, or it could be just actually, I'm going to do that art class that I really wanted to do, or I'm going to read my favorite poem, or I'm just going to
Yeah.
stand and stare out the window for 25 minutes and nobody's going to stop me doing that. These are, it's all so much softer and less complicated than we dare to imagine. And so in the first instance, that's really confusing. And it can
But
also
there
be
has to be a process though. Like, so someone who may not have ever done that, like there has to be this also some unraveling of the judgment and the story of it's not okay to stand and stare outside at the trees for 25 minutes. Like people are going to think I'm crazy. What's wrong with me, right? Like there's some unraveling that has to happen of the judgment and the stories and all of that in order to be able to, well, could I? Maybe
mm,
even 2 minutes. Could I do it for 2 minutes? You know what I'm saying? Like,
100%. And speak
yeah.
all that aloud. Like speak all the weird out. What are people going to think about me? They're going to think I'm crazy. I can't possibly stand for 20. That's ridiculous. This woman's insane. What is she talking about? Whatever it is, go
Yeah.
for name it. My Auntie Georgia stood outside and everybody thought she needed to go on, on a very long holiday. Whatever, just speak it all out. Speak it, speak it, speak it, because that in itself also helps us to transform the
Mm,
experience that you're having, because then it doesn't run around the bird cage of the mind. The
mm.
cage door is open, the thoughts are out. They're
Yes.
allowed to be
Yeah.
out. And then at some point in that real-time processing, there will be a glimmer or a thread or a second or a moment where you'll just feel like something shifted, but you wouldn't be able to say
Yeah.
what it was. But there'll be something so insignificant, or it will feel insignificant, and you'll brush it away, or you'll run out of steam. You'll take a fuller inhale and a fuller exhale, and that's it right there. That's
Yeah.
that's all we're looking for. And
Mm.
then more of those throughout the day, more of those throughout the week, more of those throughout the year. You're starting to live in a simpler, more honest, intentional, on purpose way, where somehow just lots of wee things where you're slowing down, you're enjoying the luxury of your coffee, you change the bed sheets because actually you've never liked that pattern. You've given yourself permission this not to finish this
Yep.
terrible fiction book. Actually, you want to go here, not there. All these things, truly, truly, and I've been doing this work for over 25 years. I've worked with, thousands of people in all different ways. And it's like the gentler we are, it's almost the faster we go. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
gentle we are, there's a collapsing of time almost that happens, where we suddenly realize, oh, yeah, I'm a bit happier. I'm feeling I've got more brain space. I'm not as tired. Gosh, the
And
shoes
that,
that
so would you say that the gentler we go, would you say that a lot of that is in the mind and how we talk to ourselves, things we talk about, things we do. The gentleness really needs to come from the mind. Would you be in
mm,
agreement with that? Because I'm just thinking of the mind
yeah.
body. I
Mm-hmm.
know how I talk to my body and I know how she feels about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this being gentler and kinder is is my path right now. So that's why this is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But it's the gentler of the mind where, because it's that programmed that just wrote, oh, you're sitting down again, you're fucking lazy, right? Like
Mm.
it just is this automatic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hard to reprogram that. But that's what you're talking about when you're talking about this gentler. The gentler we can be,
Mm.
the more grace, the more compassion that our mind can give to our body, the things we do, the things we feel, the things we're doing, da 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 da. That's what you're saying. The faster things can shift for us.
Yeah. And what you're also talking about there too is essentially our neural pathways. So
Hmm.
it's like when you're trying to create a new network in your brain, the first few times you will take the same route to work ultimately because you know it. But then as the other pathways are starting to form, you might only get halfway down that route, halfway down that thought,
Mm,
that unkind thought, and then be like, "Well, hold up, caught you. No, thank
mm.
you. Not
Yep.
today, my friend, not today." That's enough also. That's a miracle right there happening.
Yeah.
Then what will happen is the neural pathway is developing and creating. You'll start to feel like you're walking up to a closed door. And you'll be like, well, this door is closed and I don't know why I'm here. This is ridiculous. So I'm going to retrace my steps and I'm going to try and find the other. Oh, no, wait, there isn't another pathway. I don't know where that is. So then you have to also keep walking up to that closed door because at some point when the
Yeah.
new neural pathway is set, that doorway will be open and you will have a whole new way of being. And we get to do that over and over and over again. And with the thoughts that come in, again, if we look at even the last decade in the personal development industry, you can't go anywhere without it being 5 hacks, you know, um,
Mm,
fortified something or other, protein within protein within protein, extra this, extra that, do it faster, do it quicker. I don't know a single woman, for example, that is, or a single person that presents as a woman that is part of the 5 a.m. club that gets up at 5 a.m. to go and smash their body. I know loads of women who have really great relationships with movement and hot, cold, environments when it suits them in their cycle at their hormone level, depending upon where they are in their life, differentiating if they're perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, early hysterectomy, recovering from childbirth, whatever
yeah.
it is. So again, there are so many complexities in all of this. And maybe sometimes it's as simple as on a post-it note, you just have gentler written
Yeah. Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't know how to do that yet, but I'm willing to be curious
I'm
about.
open. Yeah. That's what the post-it note says, right? It's just that
Yeah.
constant. Oh yeah. Yeah. What you were saying earlier about like the 5 a.m. woman, right? That's one of the things I would relate that to many times that I say in my own journey as I've learned about myself and my body, my genetics, my hormones, all those things. Like what is true for me may not be true for you. And
Mhm.
so I am very much more aware of the culture and the big draw that speaks to the masses of people. But I've learned enough about myself that I am not the masses. I am an individual and I am unique. And that won't work for me because I've tried it, done it, and it didn't work. So I have to find what works for me, what's true for me. And that, 5 a.m. is not the time for me to get up and hit it hard. To be honest with you, there is no time right now for me, my body to go hit it hard because I'm still working on the let's just learn to rest and digest. Let's just learn to get out of fight and flight, right? Like let's
Yeah.
learn how to, you know, yeah. So I wasn't going to go here, but I am now that I say that. I just came from body work before our interview today, and she was working on this knot in my neck, and I was trying so hard in my mind to breathe through it. I acknowledge I was trying to do all this stuff, and it wasn't going anywhere. And all of a sudden, it was just I just put my hands on my heart and I'm like, just told in my mind was like, we're safe. And as
Mm,
soon as I said that, it released. And I'm like, I just said, did that not just release? She goes, yep. And I'm like, I just told myself we're safe. And it's like, but
yeah.
sometimes we fight against that little thing, right?
Totally. Because we don't know what it is on the other
Yeah.
side of the fight.
Yeah.
A lot of my work is also actually bringing people into what we call down regulation. It's about coming out of peak experiences.
Yeah.
And then again, when we're in all sorts of different states, or you've been working on a big project, or even, your kid comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, I need to have an exploding volcano for 9 a.m. tomorrow."
Tomorrow.
Yeah, always, right. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Actually understanding how to be the person that there's a lot of language around reparenting the self and tending to the inner
Hmm.
child, and all of that
Yes.
language is appropriate. And also in the moment, it's like, how would I act if I loved myself? I might say,
Yes.
while someone is pummeling my neck and I am gritting my teeth to bear through it, I might have a moment of conscious connection where I can put my own hands on my body and say, I'm safe, and the body
Yeah.
relaxes. And could it be that it is that simple sometimes? Yes.
Right, right. Well, the thing too is like I in my mind was trying to breathe through it, right? I was trying to do all the things that I have learned in my spiritual journey to do, like to breathe through it. I was acknowledging it. I was doing all the things, but in some way, that I used the word fighting, but I was still trying to force release. I
Yeah.
wasn't giving the grace, the permission. We're safe. It's okay. Like that's what my body needed. And it just now it's one of those things where, okay, so I've experienced this. Oh, so maybe I'll get to that point quicker next time.
Mhm.
And I'll stop the mind ego, well, you should do this and you should do that, right? Like this is what I call this mind body soul mastery. This is learning to live it, this
Mhm.
living in alignment and mastering it and live it so that it is this everyday
Totally.
process and part of your life.
Yeah. And when
As
you're,
we
after you,
no go.
I was when those thoughts come in too, like, well, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. I often find asking it why just stops it in its tracks as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why should I be doing that? Why should I
Yeah.
feel like that? Who says? And then sometimes that can also bring us to other voices that aren't ours, that are external.
Mm,
One of my
mm-hmm.
most often asked questions with my clients is, whose voice is that that's saying all those things? Because 90% of the time it isn't yours or mine. And
Yeah.
then other times, if it is the person's, it's like, well, what age is that voice? What age is that voice? When is that
Mm,
coming from? When is that coming from? And those can be some really beautiful pathways in, again, in when you need something immediately that you can pull out your pocket, or even to
yeah.
journal on, or to take for a walk, or to spend some time with. Whose voice is that? What age is that voice? And then with
Mm,
the what age is it, you can often then get a wee connection with it again, a little bit like a sensation. And like I was sharing with my heart, you can say, oh, well, what else do you want me to know today? And then
yeah.
you can say, and what else? And what else? And use the
Yeah.
repeated question until it exhausts itself, essentially. And
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, every part will eventually say, I actually just want to be loved.
Mm, mm,
Just want to be loved. And so you could just ask a repeating question, what do you want me to know today? 3, 4, 5 times. You'll get there, and you can scoop metaphorically that exiled part up and just bring
yeah.
it back into your heart, and then
Mm.
go about your day. And it also does get to be that simple. It does.
Yes. No, it does. Yeah. Like I'm just shaking my head because that's one of my favorite questions.
Hmm.
I usually end up saying, what do I need to see, hear, feel, or know? You know,
Mm.
bringing in all the senses, bringing in all the intuition and, yeah. And anything else. Yes. So we have Favorite tools there.
Hmm.
Bunny, I have to say, this has been one of the most beautiful conversations. So thank you so much for joining me today. Um, the intention of this podcast is to not just to offer hope and inspiration, but just this quiet invitation to remember your truth and to trust your path. And we talked about all of that today. And you gave so many um, nuggets and little practices and little tools. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, because this, I will re listen to this one again. Um, so, thank you for showing up with such openness and presence.
My pleasure. It's my joy to have been in the conversation with you today. Thank you.
And so, for those listening, if this conversation stirred something within you, I invite you to take a moment and to pause, reflect, and ask, what in this conversation was for me today? What did I need to hear? What was it? What was for me? And then go journal about that or go share with a friend. As Bunny and I talked about, verbal process, get it out and allow the little nuggets and the truth, your truth, to arise up and be known to you. You can find all the links to Bunny in the show notes. And until next time, my friend, keep leaning into your truth and honoring your journey. This is Brenda Stott Tomlinson, and you're listening to Mind, Body, Soul Mastery.